Yolanda O'Bannon is an everyday woman who identified an area of disconnect in her life between the values she holds dear and the values she was living. And so she did something about it. Let's listen to her tell it in her own words.
Nearly a year and a half into this series, we continue to be surprised, as we were by Yolanda O'Bannon. We had asked her boss, a scientist, to contribute an essay. He's still working on his. But in the meantime, she wrote one of her own, based, as you will hear, on the work she does for her boss. Here is Yolanda O'Bannon with her essay, For This I Believe.
I believe in being what I am instead of what sounds good to the rest of the world. Last year, I left a job I hated as a programmer for a job I love as an executive assistant, which is just a fancy word for secretary. I still feel a little embarrassed when people ask me about my new job, not because of what I do, but because of what some people, including myself, have thought of secretaries. I had always thought that secretaries were nice and maybe competent, but not smart or strong or original. I have a master's degree in English literature, have interviewed the Dalai Lama, and co-founded a nonprofit organization. People who know me wondered why I would go for what seemed to be such a dull and low-status job. Even my new boss asked if I would be bored. Why would I want to be a secretary? Because it fits me like a glove. I get to do what I love best all day, which is organize things. I like the challenge of holding the focus on the top priorities in my boss's wildly busy schedule. I can function with a high degree of chaos. Untangling finances feels like playing detective to me. I find filing restful. The only hard part is dealing with my own and other people's stereotypes and learning to focus on internal rewards rather than humble appearances. I admit that I feel vaguely embarrassed bringing the faculty lunch or serving coffee to my boss's visitors. But deep down, I don't believe that serving food is humiliating. Really, I think of it as a practice in humility. My husband is Tibetan. In Tibetan communities, you serve each other tea as a form of respect. When I'm serving coffee at work, I imagine that I'm serving a monk. Whenever I get down or defensive about being a secretary, I think of those sharp, fast-talking assistants on the West Wing and how they speak in paragraphs and remember everything, and I feel pretty cool. Sometimes I just look around at my fellow secretaries, savvy and articulate women who are masters at multitasking. I know I'm in good company. I've done a lot of solo travel in my life, in New Zealand, Japan, Africa, and India. Taking this job was harder than any of that. When I said I was going to spend a year in northern India, I'd get points. When I said I was going to be a secretary, people wondered what happened to me. It would be easier if I were someone whose skills were more respected and better compensated, a doctor, an architect, a scientist. I would feel cool when I meet someone at a party. But a friend reminded me that you only have to talk about what you do for 5 minutes at parties, but you have to live what you do every day of your life. So better to do what you love and forget about how it looks. And this, I believe.
Yolanda O'Bannon had a values conflict within herself, which prompted her to change careers. This is different than actually having a values conflict with someone or something outside of yourself. Unfortunately, identifying our core values won't guarantee that we are always surrounded by kindred souls. If you are in a position where you are outnumbered, you may need to return again to the honest introspection we've talked about and determine why you are the odd man out. Is it because you have ventured into a situation that you shouldn't be in and you need a plan to exit? Or is it because you need to reevaluate your own values or motives? If you are able to rule out the possibility that your situation opposes your values so much that you need to remove yourself, then it's probably time to employ some good old-fashioned conflict resolution. In that case, we'd urge you to not treat conflict resolution as the enemy. You could learn something valuable about yourself or about others in the process, and you just might find a middle ground that is pleasing to everyone. The first and most important thing to remember with any conflict is that nothing is ever resolved by ignoring the problem. And so no values conflict will ever be solved by pretending that you can work around it. If you have examined your own values and motives and find your complaint to be valid, follow these basic steps of conflict resolution. Speak directly to the person or people involved, and don't slander them in the process. You'll get so much further in this process if you commit to operate above the fray, regardless of another person's response to you. Give them a chance to respond and ask questions after you have explained what is bothering you. Make sure you really listen to what they have to say as well. It is possible that there's been a grave misunderstanding or that you have a blind spot, which we'll talk about more in a few minutes. We hope that these simple steps bring forth a great conversation and that your conflict will be quickly resolved. But if not, feel free to give them a second chance to see your side of the story, this time with some evidence in hand, or with the support of another person who you know has experience and will be helpful in the conflict. In your personal life, this should be someone who has knowledge of the conflict and is mature enough to be a mentor in the resolution. In your professional life, this may involve your supervisor to act as a facilitator in the discussion. Finally, if you are certain your values are in check and you can't find a solution together, it may be time to take the high road. A word of caution, this should be the end result only after a serious and concerted effort to resolve the conflict. That begins with looking in the mirror and progresses through conversations where you share your thoughts and hear those of the other person. In the process of identifying our core values, some of us might find a nasty value stuck in there which we would rather weed out. Perhaps we identify that we are truly driven by greed, or that we thought we were compassionate and respect that trait in others, but we really are not compassionate. Certainly, this is a very personal and sensitive matter. First, if you find yourself in this position, know that you only came to it by taking the core values assessment exercise seriously, and your honest introspection should be commended. Think back to your core values assessment. Who are the people you identified as those who you respect and admire for their values? Perhaps you can enlist one of them as a mentor in your personal growth. In addition, identify trusted people who can keep you accountable. Open up to them about how and where you'd like to grow and ask them to encourage you.
The last thing we'd like to discuss today is the concept of living out your values. We build trust and influence with others when our core values are evident, and that conviction is reinforced when we exhibit behavior that is consistent with them. Therefore, it is vital that our values are practiced in all areas of our life, including at work, home, and in our communities. Staying grounded by integrating all aspects of one's life is essential in the quest to discover our true north. Let's go one last time to Bill George, who's now talking about one of the most important things for a leader living out their core values, confronting the blind spots, which we all have.
As a leader, how do you confront your personal blind spots?
Well, that's one of the most difficult things. I consider it like peeling an onion and getting past some of these blind spots to the core of your being by peeling the onion back. One of the ways to do it is to have people around you who will confront you or share with you or help you. I always say if you have one person in your life with who you can share who you are and be totally open, whether it's a spouse, significant other, best friend, mentor, or a therapist, somebody you can be really totally honest with, and I think that's very important.